up in life after death and beyond. Heaven calling. Let me close that down. And hello, Kellee.
Hi, James.
Hello, Kellee White. We have an incredible guest tonight, and one that's changed all of our lives. And our guest is Kellee White.
Yay!
She's a trauma specialist trauma therapy, and also grief counselor, life traumas, and also, of course, is astrology and mediumship, intuitive work, and really has come out with a brand new book, which we're going to talk about throughout the show, called Cracked Open, Seeing the Unseen World, right?
Yes.
And it's number one.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. It's amazing.
James,
and you deserve it.
Thank you. But you may remember, I'm sure you remember, as I'm telling you the stories, and you said to me, you have to write a book. You have to write a book. You said that.
I don't remember that, but
you said that from the beginning. You have to write a book. And I'd already been thinking about it, and I knew I had to, but you really encouraged me and pushed me in the best way, and such love and devotion to helping this baby be born. I can't tell you how grateful I am to you for that.
Well,
Thank
Cracked
you.
Open, Discover the Unseen World, Kelly's new book, and it went to number one. It was released a week before it was supposed to be.
It was released on my mother's birthday. It was supposed to be released today. Yeah.
Okay, and it was released on your mom's birthday, yeah. And Mom helped write the book with you. Started the book.
We started the book together.
And then the other side.
She was my ghostwriter, as you pointed out.
So Kellee White's book, Cracked Open Journey, is an extraordinary tale of transformation, resilience, and spiritual awakening. Cracked Open, Discovering the Unseen World chronicles a profound spiritual journey from a high-powered corporate executive, but a lot of people didn't know that. They'll find out how Kellee didn't know about. And executive to a compassionate and gifted spiritual medium. Understanding of our missions here on Earth and envisions from heaven, offering insights into how we plan our lives before we come back into this world. And it goes on. But I want to get into the stories because, number one, Kellee, I met Kellee, I don't know how many years ago.
20 years ago.
Years ago, it seems like yesterday. And I talked to you on the phone. I was on a cruise somewhere
in Italy. You were in Italy with Brian Weiss.
With Brian Weiss. And the moment I heard your voice, I said, oh, I know her. I just connected with you. And then we've just been friends ever since.
You said to me, I'll be back in 2 weeks and I'll call. We talked for an hour and you said, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And when I come back, I will call you. And you called me to the day on 2 weeks.
Wow. And it was like an old friend. It really was. It was somebody that resident. You feel connected. And Kellee was working as a therapist at the time. Yeah.
No, not at all. No, I didn't even have. Didn't go back to grad school till 2009. Right. I didn't go back to grad school for years. I was actually working as a medium at that time.
But you wanted those letters behind your name. I remember because your mother was in the same office and you kept on saying, Mr. Kellee, you're more of a medium. And you said, no, I got to get that. I think because of Mom. I said, but you're going to be a medium. And
you said that over and over to me.
And in the book, you've done an incredible job at weaving through the therapeutic insights along with your spiritual abilities and your experiences. I mean, it's done so well. It's crafted so well. How you put those two together, trauma and emotional traumas and so many incredible ways of putting that together.
I wanted everybody to be able to see the different lenses that I use that are available to everybody. But I like to view a session with anybody through different lenses. It might be a therapy lens. It might be a mediumship lens. I don't know what lens it's going to be.
Yeah. And there's so many stories in the book that I want to get to because I have 4 pages worth of things to talk to.
Great.
I've been waiting for this for a long time. And so when your mom was alive here, how long has she been passed over now? 3 years?
She passed over in 2018.
2018. Okay.
Yeah.
So she wanted to write a book with you.
Yes.
And so how did this all start?
Well, we were going to write it together. Yeah. I don't know why I'm losing my voice over this. Not the time to lose my voice. It's like, Mom, let me talk, please. We started writing it together. She was going to write it from the psychological aspect of watching her beloved daughter, me, go through a traumatic brain injury and seeing, as I've said many times, lack of a better word, dead people all around. And she watched me from a psychological, she was a psychologist. So she knew I wasn't schizophrenic. She also knew, without telling me, that her own father was a physical medium.
Yes.
So she could see me having a spiritual awakening. She didn't have the
As her grandpa said, she has a gift.
She has a gift. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And every Sunday you used to have sessions, your grandfather, right? That afternoon sessions.
Yes, with his family. He was a table tipper. He could lift tables without touching them, and he was very special in the family.
And from a young age, Kellee was, people would say, is she normal? And your mother would say, she's normal. But there was always a strange sense of things that would happen. You'd see dead people before you. Your uncle Curly, was it?
Yeah.
Was
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And your grandma, who didn't believe in life after death, very much, I guess, an atheist. And then
she was an atheist. Yeah.
She died. She came over above
First
the
thing.
bed.
First thing, she wouldn't leave me alone. And I kept saying, I can't sleep. And my mother said to her, tell me. I said, what do I do? My mother said, oh, tell her to leave you alone. And she did.
And one of the first experiences in the book you talk a lot about, too, is when you were a young girl and you were very sick. Encephalitis, I think it was. Is that right?
Encephalitis, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, encephalitis is inflammation of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I was bitten by a mosquito, actually, and I was very sick. I ended up in a coma, and I ended up on the other side.
Right.
And because I literally was leaving my body. And as I went through this kind of like a tunnel of sorts, I was trying to push through, and I could see my aunts. I did not even have aunts at the time, but I could see them as my aunts. And they said to me, I said, oh, thank God. I was so relieved to be back on the other side in heaven. And they said to me, oh, no, you can't stay. And I said, well, I have to go. And I knew I could kind of force myself through. And they said, no, you have to stay because your mother's life will not be the same. Her what she's here to do, it won't be done. It was very, very clear.
A theme throughout the book from the very beginning is responsibility. That was your kind of major soul lesson, one of your major soul lessons in this lifetime, responsibility, correct?
Yes. And everybody has a life theme in life. Everybody comes in with different life themes, but mine has been responsibility.
Yeah. And you talk a lot in the beginning of the book about how you planned this lifetime, your soul group and your guides, and you planned these experiences that you're going to have. And it wasn't going to be a easy life. It was going to be an up and down kind of crazy life, which is what you've had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, we plan before we come in. We plan our life. And I mean, even we plan, James, that you and I are going to meet, and we know this, and that's why the soul recognition. But I planned a lot in this lifetime, and I really know, and I remember planning. I remember the planning experience. I remember certain things that were going to happen, and for my own growth, for the growth of my soul.
At the beginning of the book, I mean, it's so well done and it's so well paced and written because you go through the story like you're sitting having a conversation with you from the very beginning of your experience, and you bring it all the way through. And I mean, you have had some life. Another major, I guess you'd say, theme is would it be abuse? Would it be?
Yeah, I learned a lot about abuse. I had a lot of abuse from lots of experiences of abuse. So it's interesting because, again, one of the lenses that I use when I work with people, James, is I look for abuse because I understand it. They don't have to say a word. I understand it. I see it. I got it. And I know that was why I had as much abuse as I had in this life. I know it was to further my growth and understand forgiveness, understand compassion for what I've gone through. I had to understand a lot in this lifetime in order to help people, in order for me to grow.
That's right. And then, Kellee, after you were ill with that encephalitis, I want you to tell a story about the amazing story. This is the first one I said, is this real? About your dad when you were 3 years old, or you were a toddler?
I was 3 years old. And
tell everybody about that.
So,
your dad was a jazz musician.
My father was a well-known jazz musician. And when I was 3 years old, my mother was busy teaching high school. She was out teaching, and my dad was supposed to be watching me. And he didn't watch me. Instead, he overdosed on heroin. So he overdosed on heroin, and I was 3 years old.
Outside of your house,
outside of the house, in the front of the house. And I went to see him, and he was there. And I ran over to the neighbors, and the neighbors called the police, and they stamped DOA on his forehead, dead on arrival. And he actually survived. He had many, many lives in this lifetime, But the experience of the trauma of that, I feel, because it was right after that, James, that I got encephalitis.
Wow.
So I think that my whole system went into shock, because it's a very scary thing, as you can imagine, for anybody to have that experience, but a 3-year-old. So it really left me really hard to me to be around anybody that's done drugs. It's hard for me to do it.
And not to mention, you're such a sensitive, you're an empath.
Yes.
You're picking up all this stuff left and right. And growing up, your mother knew you were an empath. She knew you were sensitive.
She always knew that.
You, right? She tried protecting as best as she could.
The best that she could. Yes. Yeah, she did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, so the first thing was really your journey, I guess, would be around having a boyfriend, because the book is the guys that you met, the different relationships that you had, and you definitely had to learn stuff from relationships, that's for sure.
Oh, you betcha. Like we all have. I mean, in therapy, we say we learn the most through relationships, and I had my share. I certainly did. And if there were the worst men in the room and there was one good guy, or one bad guy and all the rest were good, I would go for the bad guy. So I learned a lot about who to pick now. I understand about abuse, and I learned a lot.
And addiction and abuse, and really interesting. You had a great experience. You always felt there was a reason for you being here in the book. You talk about that.
Yeah. I always knew that, James. I always had a strong energy about why I was here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even though some of the stories were really rough to go through, I knew I had to get through them. And that was that resilience piece.
And you also talk about spiritual awakening. And could you explain what you mean by spiritual awakening? Because that's a big part of the book too, that everybody has a spiritual awakening in their own way.
Everybody will go through whatever it is, whether it's trauma, whether it's drama, whatever it's, I don't know, illness, death, loss, grief, any of that. And it opens us up spiritually. And in my case, because I had a brain injury, it cracked me open, actually, for a spiritual awakening. And a spiritual awakening is when all of a sudden you start questioning things, or you start thinking there's more than this in life. There's more than that. What is a deeper meaning? And it may start with somebody seeing the numbers. You know, people see 111 or 222. And why is that happening? It's just little things can wake us up. And in my case, I had a very fast spiritual awakening, but it lasted for many years. But I was cracked open and had it. In some people's, they may have lost a parent. They may have lost a child that's come to show them how to wake up. It's a lot of reasons people wake up. But spiritual awakening is a real big time in somebody's life, because you can't go back. You can't go back. Once you start to have an awakening, you can't pretend you didn't hear that or feel that, or, you start to wake up. As
you said to me many times, once you see something, you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. Yeah. I tried, James, to go back into my old life. I wanted my old life back so badly. And every door had disappeared. It wasn't even shut. They had disappeared.
Well, there's a couple of times in the book, I mean, some stories are just outrageously incredible. When you were, let's see, was it when you were going to be a chef? Your passion, you thought, I want to go cooking, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you were working at a restaurant. It shows you how things, the intelligence of the spirit world makes things happen. And you were working, I don't know if you were a sous chef or just in the kitchen.
I was an executive chef.
Executive chef. Mm-hmm. But also, I guess one of the chefs cut themselves.
Yeah, well, what happened, that story, that was even, every story might have been strange. I didn't know which one you were going to, but that one, no, I was a cocktail waitress.
That's what it was.
Cocktail waitress. I was just going through, I just gone through college. And and then one of the chefs, executive chef, I think, cut his hand up really badly. And they said, is there anybody that can come and cook? And they looked at me, can you come and cook? And I go, as a matter of fact, I can.
You always had a passion for cooking.
I did. And then I went in there, and that started me down a whole road of being a chef and going into the food business and everything that I had done before my awakening. Yeah, really put me on the road.
You went to France to study.
I graduated from Love Hewitt in Paris, culinary school, and I loved it. I was one of the only women at the time, and I was pregnant at the time I went to culinary school. I mean, that's how determined I was.
Amazing.
Yeah. Nothing stops me. If I have an idea, I just keep going and going.
Kellee, you're one of the strongest people I know. I mean, the resilience, and in the book, the resilience that you go through these things. And I'm just going to skip around a little bit because it's not in the same order, but you're working in the corporate world. I think with you, there was always a sense of balance, right? I've got to do corporate, but I got to do the spiritual, but I'm not really sure. Corporate, being that Virgo, I have the corporate. And I think you wanted approval from people, your mom or your family, whatever, but you felt driven, right? You felt, and so
I was really driven. Well, the corporate world was really interesting because it's the mundane world. It's, really very little to do with the spiritual world. And in the mundane world, I had finally made it, like through all of the abuse I had gone through and all of the things I had suffered and all the traumas, I finally made it to a place where I was making a lot of money, where I lived at the beach, where my daughter and I were free. We could do anything we wanted to do. I was loving my life, but corporate world will suck the soul out of you. I mean, it was a tough way to go.
And you had the abuse there too from these coworkers. They were all men. They were all men.
Please, I went through so much. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I didn't even put all of it in because it was just too much. But I learned an awful lot. But then I had the head injury, which was, took me to another dimension.
Well, before that, though, we got to get to Chicago. Your meeting, and there was a business meeting, a corporate meeting. You worked for Frigidaire. Was it Frigidaire or?
Oh no! I worked for a large corporation.
And there was a business meeting you had in Chicago. Remember that?
I do. I had a meeting.
You got to tell everybody about that experience.
Okay. So you're talking about the 9/11 experience?
No. The driver. You're in the car.
Oh, that one. Oh my God. Yeah. I had so many that I can't remember. That was a big one. I was in a car in a business meeting, and there were 4 of us in the car. There was a driver.
All men, you're the only woman.
All men. And the driver, and then a friend in front, and then I was sitting in the back with another fellow. And we were driving to a business meeting, a big meeting, actually. And the man who was driving, now this is in Chicago with lots of traffic on the expressway. I mean, all of a sudden the car starts going from, say, 50 miles an hour to 90 and 100 miles an hour. And we were sitting in the back seat and we're like, what's happening here? I mean, the car went whoop like this and just started taking off. Well, the man who was driving was narcoleptic and had a narcoleptic seizure, and he's driving and the car is going almost 100 miles an hour. Why we weren't killed, I have no idea. I mean, I can explain it now, but at the time you're sitting, I'm thinking, oh my God, my daughter, am I ever going to see my daughter? And the guy in the front and the other man in the back somehow grabbed him, pushed him to grab the wheel and put his foot off the brake and pulled us over to the side of the road. And it was really terrifying, but we survived. I survived that one. It was unbelievable.
You survived many, and there are many stories of like that one that are just otherworldly. I mean, another one which really made an impact on me, which made an impact on you, obviously, when was it Praagh you were dating, and you were looking at doing well? Your mother bought a house in Beverly Hills. Your mom bought a house. And Holly was a baby, a toddler, I guess, or 2 years old. And you're looking at the house. You went upstairs, right? Tell everyone about that experience.
Yeah, I think the most challenging and the hardest experience I ever had, or I will ever have, is, and I really want to caution people when I say this, and you'll have to read about this in the book. But I had the most trauma, aside from the death of a child, that somebody could have. And my daughter was 18 months old, and my mother was going to be watching her for me. It was the first time I was actually going away, period. First time I was leaving my daughter at 18 months alone, because I'd been that kind of mother. I was always with. And my daughter.
Always being responsible, Kellee White.
Very responsible.
Yeah.
And so my daughter was, again, 18 months, and I thought, well, I have to let her have some, I can't be hovering over her at all times. And yet my instinct was to hover over her at all times. And so she walked over to the window. My mother had just bought this house. She had just bought the house and had been there less than a week. And my daughter walked.
Third floor?
It was the third. We were on the third floor.
Third floor.
And of the house, a large house. And my daughter walked up to the window of my mother's bedroom, and like this, and then pushed it and fell out of the window in front of me. And she fell 3 stories. And it was as traumatic as, however, I'm not making it right now. It's extremely traumatic.
That's when I called. Is that Kelly?
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like,
And she survived. She survived, everybody. She surved. But
not only did she survive, they said there was not a touch.
There wasn't a scratch on her. There was nothing. And you could see in the story I tell about what the trauma did to me, and because that kind of trauma, it's hard. I still cry over it to this day because it was just so traumatic in front of me. It changed all of our lives. Yeah. And my family didn't talk about it. We did not talk about it. Really? So this was in 1986. The trauma is a big buzzword now. Sure. We didn't talk about traumas in 1986. Not really. I mean, it wasn't years later when I had my head injury that I had to deal with this, with the trauma of the near-death experience with her, of her almost dying in front of me. And it was really
you put it beautifully in the book where you talk about the angels softly guided her down.
The angels carried her down. My mother was smart enough to know, she didn't know what to do. So she sent me to, somebody had told her about a medium in Malibu.
Malibu.
And
Eknart. Yeah. Channeled Annie Besant.
Yes.
I read the book.
Yes. And so I went to see this woman. I'd never been to a medium. It was almost out of my ordinary, really, and but I went to see her, and she said to me, when I sat down, she said, I want to tell you something. She said, all the angels are telling me they carried your daughter down. They all lifted her up and carried her down. And that was the first time I got any relief from this experience. And then later I got more relief from it in a way, again, that I would have never imagined through a therapist that I had seen over the accident.
The intelligence of that world and how they guide us every day. It's just, we take it for granted, I think, a lot of humans. And it's just, they have their fingers in everything. I mean, they really do. We're never alone. We really
that's one of the things I could tell people. I can assure you, you might think you're alone. You are not. That's a joke. You are not alone. It's not possible.
And another thing, insight that people may not know about Kellee White is I call Kellee White the original fire starter because that's what she used to do. In that, when she'd be upset or an argument, things start flying around the house. Tell us about that, won't you?
Well, again,
mayonnaise jars and
Oh yeah, it was after and there's a lot of supernatural stuff that's packed into this book. Yeah, but after my head injury, and this energy is just like coursing through my body, and I couldn't control it. It was outside of me. James, when that energy comes in, and this was Kundalini energy, so it was like, and if I were upset, if I was upset at somebody, they would know it, because all of a sudden the lights from the ceiling would catch on fire. The glasses would shake and break. The television sets would come unplugged and broken. I went through 7 computers. My mother finally said, you can't stay here anymore. It's too much for me. Kellee, we can't handle this.
And your daughter Holiday said, Mama, please cut it out. I have to have friends.
Oh my God, no. One day Holiday was there with her best friend, Shannon, who I was like a mother to, who I just love Shannon. The 3 of us were having lunch, and the refrigerator just opened itself up, and a mayonnaise jar just went out and started shaking. And Holiday said, and then dropped to the floor, and Holiday said, I'm done. I can't do this, Mom. I can't do this. Yeah. It was pretty rough.
And another great one, which is a classic story of Kellee White, is when you were, one of the first stories you told me before the book even, was when you went to Orange County to see someone speak.
I did.
A well-known spiritual person, I can name names, and tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was such a large.
Kellee White, she's up. Yeah.
That was a big experience. Basically, my mother didn't know what to do with me because I had energy coursing through my body. I was in a I don't even know how to explain the state I was in, because I was halfway living on the other side and halfway living here. And which, by the way, if you do that for very long, you will get burned out. I mean, it's really impossible to do. But I was doing that. And so I found somebody was having this angel kind of, what do you call it? Like a class. Yeah, like a workshop. And so I was in Orange County, and I was staying with my mother in Beverly Hills. So for people that don't know, it's like, a good 2-hour drive, right? Hour and a half with traffic.
How old were you at this time? About in your 30s?
Oh, no, I was 42, 43,
okay.
Maybe even 44 at this time. No, because I was about 42, 43. And so what happened is I go drive out to this angel workshop, and the woman that was talking, the people that were up there talking, she was saying all the wrong things, and everything she was saying, it was getting me more upset and more upset. And she was doing readings for people in the audience and telling them absolutely the wrong things. Absolutely. I mean, it was,
Kellee? Was so
because I was halfway on the other side and halfway here. So I knew, because I was also a psychic, and I was a real medium, and I was looking at this going, everything she's saying is going to cause harm to these people. And I was so beside myself with her and the group that was there. I got in my car. I had to leave, and I got in my car. My car was shaking. I'll never forget. And I drove all the way on the 405
freeway, shaking the car.
Shaking the car. I get to my mom's house, and I'm so shook up. And I walk up my mom's giant staircase to get up into the house, and my mother opens the door, and she said, "Kellee, are you okay?" And I said, "No, Mom, I'm not. I got to go to bed. I'm very upset." And she said, "Well, I need to show you something." Now, my mother was home alone at the time, and she was working on taxes. She was working on her taxes alone. Nobody was in the house. And my mother had the taxes of her stuff just kind of laid out on this huge 5-foot by 5-foot glass, heavy duty table that weighed 350 pounds. And it had a beautiful vase on it with flowers, and it had books on it, but it had all of her papers on it.
And metal on the foundation.
And metal on the foundation. I mean, heavy duty. It took 3 men to carry it up the stairs. The table was bought in Italy. I mean, it was a huge deal, this table. Must have cost a fortune. But anyway, what happened was, when my mother said, "Well, can I show you something?" And apparently when my mother had gone up to do something, and she came back down right before I got home, she looked at the table, and she couldn't believe what she saw. The table had lifted up and had turned all the way around, 4 or 5 inches on each side. It had completely lifted up and turned. Everything on the table remained the same, but the table had up and turned and twisted. And my mother didn't know, none of it, we couldn't explain it, other than I know that my energy was so chaotic that day. And so what happened is, my mother called in an engineer, a lawyer engineer. So he worked as a lawyer and an engineer. So he was both. He came in, and he was there for an hour. I'll never forget this man, Jim. And he looked at that table. He looked at the imprints on the floor, on the carpet. He said, I don't know. There's no earthquake. You couldn't have lifted this. Nobody could have done this. And then my mother said, "Well, let me tell you about Kellee." And then he went like this. I believe it. There was no explanation for it. And that's when I found out that my grandfather was a table tipper. My grandfather, without touching tables, they'd just fly up and dance. And he'd say, "Table dance," and the table would dance and then move. And
was your Uncle Curly very psychic too, right? You had Uncle
I think
Curly.
Everybody in my family was very psychic on my mother's side. I think they were wildly psychic, James. Some of them
were. Your mother was very much a healer. God, she was very intuitive. Your mom.
Very intuitive, very psychic, and very much. So yeah, it runs in families.
She helped write this book, so she was doing it here on the earth when she was still around, and then she had cancer, right? And she went. Yeah. Tell us about that. So you went to Texas in the very beginning to some new kind of therapy in those days.
Yeah, my mom. This would have been in 1979. No, 79. Yeah, about 1979. 79. She got cancer for the first time. She ended up with cancer twice. But the first time,
she worked very hard.
She worked really hard.
You say in the book, you said, "My mother worked really hard." That's what she found out her lesson was.
That really was it. Yeah. So I went to the cancer ward with her because I didn't want her to be by herself. And so I traveled with her, and I lived in the cancer ward for 1 summer with her while she got this special kind of cancer treatment. And it was a really unique treatment at the time. They don't do it now, but it was a really hard on the system. And every time I was there staying with her, but I'd go downstairs to get something. And I'd come back up and she'd say, oh, did you see that wonderful nurse that was here? I'd say, no, where'd she go? Oh, she's so wonderful. And I said, whoa, tell me about her. Oh, she told me that she talked to Jesus and that I'm going to live. And I said, oh, great. Well, my mom said, you got to go see her. And I went everywhere to find this woman. I mean, up and down this whole friggin' hospital. It can't be that big. And my mom described this woman exactly with her name. Anyway, everybody told me there's no such woman here. So I know that woman was an angel.
Well, then you met a South African priest.
I did. Then I met a South African priest. You're right. I met a South African priest.
Yes.
Who
I read the book.
Yeah. And I said to him,
at the hospital, he met him.
I was at the hospital. So my mother, we didn't know if my mother was going to live or she was going to not live. And it was really, very sad, very challenging time for me because my mother and I were so close. Yeah. And when my mother said to me, I want you to go on semester at sea, right, which is a ship that goes around the world.
Right. And
I was 20 years old at the time. And I said, I'm not leaving you. What are you, nuts? I am not leaving you. And she said, Kellee,
my responsibility.
Yeah, I want you to go on semester at sea. It's a ship that goes around the world. I want you to go on it. She said, go talk to Father, I can't remember his name at the time. I have it in my book, Father John.
Father John,
go down and talk to him. And he's in a special place. So I went in to speak to him. And first thing I said to him was, can you tell me about this special nurse that is here? He said, oh, he said something like he had seen her before and he knew of her, but and that my mother, he'd heard of her. Yeah. And he said, but she's going to help your mother. But then he turned to me and he said, look, Kellee, you need to go to semester at sea. You need to go on this ship. Your mother will be okay. You need to go. You have to go. You have to go. And I listened to him. And I did go on this trip, and I was in South Africa. I mean, the whole thing was kind of amazing. But he gave me the relief, the okay that she was going to.
And then he said to you, "Oh, by the way, I know who that nurse is. It's Nurse Angel."
Yes, and that's exactly what he said. I know who that nurse is. Oh my God, James! And that was just I get chills even thinking about that one. It was just remarkable. You know, when you put the dots together, it was just remarkable.
The book is all about that. It's like putting these dots together. It's like, what a life. It's incredible. These things happen. You know, 1, 2, 3. It's like all part of your whole life. It's incredible read. Yeah. And then on the trip with you at sea, you went to New Delhi. Tell everybody about that experience because that's changed your life, I would think.
It totally changed my life. I just turned 21 years old, and I decided when I went to India, I wanted to be by myself because I just felt this kind of energetic thing about that I needed to experience the world by myself. And so I went to India. I was in India on semester at sea, and I got into a cab and I said, I'd like to go to, one of the temples. And they took me to one of the temples. And I noticed everybody was staring at me, but I just assumed everybody was staring at me because I had long blonde hair and, I'm young and whatever. And when I got there, this man comes up to me and he said, hello, may I please read your thumb? And I said, read my thumb? And he said, yes, I have a lot of information I need to tell you. And he said, I read thumbs and I read the Akashic records. I'd never heard the word the Akashic records. And so I said, okay. Now I didn't have anything on me. I didn't have a passport. I had my little bag, a purse, but I didn't really have any information on me. And he takes my thumb and he looks at it. And he writes it on a piece of paper and he folds it up and he hands it to me. And he said, I want you to have this. And I opened it up and it had my first, middle, and last name, my mother's first, middle, maiden name, married name, my boyfriend's at the time, first, middle, last name. He said, you're not going to marry him. He's going to run for politics. Everything that he said was correct. He's not going to win. He's not going to marry you. Correct. I was like, what else is he going to say? You are going to have a daughter. And then he said, you are here to be a medium. you may choose it or you may not in this lifetime. The choice, the free will choice is up to you, but this will happen. I mean, I was just blown away by it.
What did you think of this man saying?
I had a feeling it meant something. And I thought, it went inside of me. You know, when something resonates?
Mm-hmm.
But again, I was barely 21 with a whole life in front of me. I couldn't. Yes, I had seen dead people. Yes, I had seen ghosts. Yes, I had seen all of that. But I was striving for whatever normal was. I was striving.
Did you have a desire, a certain passion or a career you were going to go after at that time? You thought you were going to get involved in?
I did not know what my career path was going to be at the time. I didn't know if I was going to teach. In some part of me thought I was just going to get married and have children. I mean, remember it was late 70s, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, really. So when he said that, I was always interested in astrology. But then later I went to see my first Vedic astrologer, Chakrapani, and he said to me, "Oh, you're here to do this work." I mean, it was like just months after seeing this man. Oh, okay. But it's still, James, in my mind, I still had other things to do, which was I had to be normal. I had to get a job. I had to, whatever it was.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask you. Do you think at that time did you ever question, am I normal? Am I losing my mind? Did you ever have that sort of a...
I always knew I was different. Okay. And I think that people that knew me when I was younger would say I was different. My mother used to say, if Kellee said to me, don't get on that plane, I wouldn't get on the plane.
Right. Speaking of plane, let me just throw this one at you, because there's, again, the book Cracked Open, it's really cracked full of a lot of stories, Kellee's life experiences. One amazing one, if I could, I think it was Praagh you were dating at the time. It was someone who was horrendous to you. And there was going to be a flight you're going to. Yeah. And what year was that again? And can you tell us?
This would have been in
2000 something, right?
No, this would have been 1998, 99. Wait, I have to think. Oh no, gosh, no, James, no. This was 2001. It was after my head injury. It was 2001.
I remember it was 2000s, right?
Yeah.
And so which Craig? Was it Craig?
No, it was somebody else. Yeah, okay. No, it was somebody else. Whatever the names are, everybody, they've been changed.
They've been changed. Not the real names.
Yeah. Oh yes. So I'm not sure which is that.
You were in a really bad relationship. He was a very abusive person and put you down all the time. And you were, I think you were in corporate, I'm not sure. You and him were going to go on a holiday, go on a vacation somewhere.
Yes.
France, I think it was.
We were going to go to Europe, and we were taking our kids. We each had children and a daughter, and we were going to go to France. And
he never believed in you. He thought you were
didn't believe in any of this. This was...
You were crazy, yeah.
None of this. Because this was, again, after... He knew me before my head injury, and then this was after the head injury. So he didn't believe any of this. He didn't like any of this. But I had a vision. So in those days, I would start seeing visions. I mean, I would just see things happening. And I saw a vision. We were supposed to leave on July 4th, and out of LAX. And I saw a vision of a shooter at LAX. And I saw it, and I saw where it was going to happen. And I picked the phone up to call him, and I said, we cannot leave on that day. There's going to be a shooting at LAX at this time. I cannot do it. And he was like, we're going. I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I'm not going. If you want to take your daughter, go for it. I am not putting myself in that arena at that time. I'm not. And sure enough, he did back down, and he said, well, then what are we going to do? And we ended up going on a cruise, which also was like a cruise into hell. And being together was like hell. And so, but there was a big shooting at LAX at that time. Exactly the time I said everything.
I think it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was like 10 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning. Yeah. And
was it Air France? Was it right next to
it? Was El Al.
El Al, that's right.
Yeah, and it was
where you're going to be.
Right next to Air France, right there. So it would have been not a good thing for any of us. It was an awful thing, period. And then when I said to him, look, this just happened.
Hello.
He didn't care.
Wow.
Yeah. It is amazing.
So, Kellee, you heard, obviously, Peter Hurkos was a very well-known psychic who was a house painter. And he fell off a ladder and cracked his head. And ever since that moment, he was extremely psychic. And I've seen him, when he was alive. I saw him do his thing. And he would just walk into a room and people put objects on a table. And he would just walk into a room and he would know who belonged to it, pick it up. He'd tell you everything about them. So you kind of cracked open and kind of not off a ladder, but tell us about your brain injury.
Yes. So, and I do, when you told me about Peter, I looked him up and I was just mesmerized by his story as well. So thank you.
The hemisphere of the brain, like the psychic faculties.
Yes. So for me, I was getting into my car in the year 2000. I was getting into my car. I had just come back from Hong Kong. I traveled all over the world, Hong Kong and Europe. I was very tired. I was exhausted. And as I was I promised Holiday that I would take her to see Sting at the Greek Theater. And so I was getting into my car. I didn't clear the door, if you will. And as I opened the door and I got in, I smashed my frontal lobe. And cars don't move, for the record, but brains shake. And I felt a whoosh in my brain, and I felt hot something, water or hot blood, go right through my brain. And in my mind, I was I was a single mother. I didn't have time for something to even think that I had a brain injury. Right. And if a brain doesn't open up, it's the worst kind of head injury because it goes inside. And so my brain injury stayed inside.
And you just got in the car and drove? I mean, did you stop?
I got in the car because, James, I don't apparently stop. I went in the car and I drove us to the Greek Theater. We saw Sting, and coming home, I started to come unglued. And my poor daughter, who was 15 at the time, had to drive us home from the Greek Theater to Long Beach. That's a long way for a 15-year-old to drive. It was a pretty rough thing. And I was just, hysterical and I was raging. And that was how, well, we didn't know it at the time. I didn't know for a full year that I'd had a brain injury.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, so how you lived, did your head hurt you?
I had a head that ached. So I never had a headache. I had a head that ached.
And did you think of going to a doctor or no?
No. Not even in my mind, a head injury, you just keep going. You hit your head. So what? You just keep going. And this is the same injury that Natasha Richardson had, and she died within 17 hours. And I was told by all the doctors and the teams that I saw that I should have died. Within only 3% survived. I should have died.
Bleeding. It was a bleeding.
It was a bleeding. I bled for a year and a half internally. Can you imagine?
So what made you finally go to a doctor, Kellee?
What made me go to the doctor was.
Were you in Tahiti?
No, it was long after that. It was literally a year and a half after I had my injury. Because my injury was on August 10th of 2000, August 10th, 2000. And I didn't go to a doctor until October of 2001. So it was several months, year and several months after that. But I did go. So what made me go is, and that's part of the story, is that you have to understand, everybody, that my father was Jewish and my mother was Southern Baptist. So I had no religion, none. They just cross each other out, which is the good news for me, because I didn't have to go through that. But what happened was I couldn't get out of bed anymore, James. I couldn't work. I couldn't get out of bed. I was in terrible, terrible shape, not knowing what was happening to me. And I looked up and I saw floating over me, I saw Jesus floating over me. And I will tell you this, he exists. And he had this big smile and nothing but love and compassion and big smile. And he took this kind of like smelling salt kind of a thing, and he put it in front of my nose, and it smelled like incense, like myrrh, like something like frankincense and a myrrh. And I looked at him and I asked him to do it again, and he put it there, he big smile. And then he did this, and then he said to go to sleep. So I went right back to sleep. And then the next day, I felt a hand under my ass that said, I heard a voice and a hand under my ass that said, get up and call Dr. So-and-so now. And it was like the voice of God. I never heard a voice like that before. And I got into it.
You called them up and they didn't have an opening.
Well, I said to this voice, I can't get in. You know, this is LA. I can't get in to see him. It's going to take weeks to get in. And they said, go see him today. You're going to see him today. And I was like, okay, voice. All right. So I picked up, I was like, okay, God. So I called and they said to me, oh, no, Kelly, we can't see you. I said, but I had a head injury and I need to see him today. I couldn't say, God told me I'm going to see him today. And they said, I'm sorry you can't get in, but in 2 weeks, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And I said, but I have to go in there today. And they said, well, that's just not going to happen. And I said, look, he's going to have a cancellation. And when he does, take my number, call me. And then she's like, okay, but that's just not going to happen. And then I hang up the phone and I heard the same voice say, wash your hair, go take a shower, have something to eat, get gas, and drive. Because you know how far Thousand Oaks is? His office was in Thousand Oaks from Long Beach. That's a 2-hour drive with no traffic. And at 5 minutes to 2, when I got there, so I did everything that God told me to do. When I got at 5 minutes to 2, I got the call from that doctor, and they said, he can see you in 5 minutes.
And you're already on your way. You're almost
I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really do listen to these messages. I listen throughout the whole book.
And have you noticed from that beginning start that how can I put this to you? Your abilities have gotten stronger, stay the same, changed?
What happened is initially they're just, it's what Anita Marjani said to us at the time. You can imagine you're in a warehouse and you just have a little tiny flashlight, and then all of a sudden all the floodlights go on. So for me, everything was the floodlight. I had to learn to get to understand how to use the mediumship, and that's where you came in, James. You really said, no, this is how you do it, this is how it works. And I also had gone through, there's a lot of points in my book of different people that came up at different times to help me, but you're the one that said, this is how you do this. I mean, you really got me focused on the mediumship piece instead of it's so easy because here I can see everything. You have to learn to do it through your third eye. You really have to learn how to do it. There's a whole technique on how you learn mediumship. You can't be free willy out there with this. You just can't be.
No spiritual bypasses.
No spiritual bypasses. I mean, mediums have said to me, oh, I wish that I could just see like that. No, you don't. You will burn out and then people will think you're crazy. And it's just too much. It's too much for a system.
That's right.
Your body can't handle it.
Yeah.
It has to unfold naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and part of the book, a lot of the book, which is great, again, weaved in with the therapeutic aspects as well. You talk a lot about ADHD, ADD. Can you go into that?
I was diagnosed at 40 with ADD and attention deficit disorder. A lot of women don't have the hyperactivity. They kind of are more creative inside, like think like that. They kind of daydream. And I had that. But what happened is that because I was diagnosed at 40 years old through a brain exam, through an EEG on my brain, I had an EEG. The same doctor who did it when I was 40, when I was 43, he looked at my EEG when I finally got in it that day, and he looked and he compared the two, and he picked up the phone and he called my mother in front of me and he said, we need to get her to UCLA right now. We have a situation. So my brain totally changed. But as far as the ADD goes, I can work as a therapist. I work really well with ADD people, really well. And I work well with ADHD people.
And you work really well with trauma people as well. That's a major specialty of yours.
Major specialty, because I understand trauma from the get-go. I understand trauma. So I really like to help people with trauma. And everybody in this lifetime is going to have trauma. Everybody's going to have trauma. It's part of when we arrived here. We before we incarnated, we planned some of these events or all of these events.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you do so well with the therapeutic part of the book too. And
well, I thought it was
you married the two of them together so well.
Thank you. You know, James, I just felt it was important for me to add that therapy piece because, you know, my mind, I'm constantly adding things in my brain. I'm constantly learning.
That's Virgo.
I'm Virgo. I mean, I have to constantly, like, you know, have information coming in. And so the psychology, well, I tell you something really interesting. Because of my head injury, I didn't know if I was going to be able to go to grad school. And I went to grad school, everybody, at 52 years old. So if I can do it at 52, anybody can go back to grad school. But it was a funny thing. I just got so hyper-focused on the psychology. I loved it. So I did really well.
That's when I entered July, she said, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think as far as your brain now? Is it?
Oh.
What's the latest as far as?
The latest is I use most of my right brain. But I use my right brain, I should say, not most of it. I don't think any of us use all of our brains. Please God, we should. But I'm able to use my left brain pretty well now, pretty well. So
except the airports when you and I travel together.
Okay, when you and I travel together, forget about it. We both go to the right brain, and we just have fun, and then we just know the universe will take care of us, whether we're driving. I don't care what we're doing.
Our first show we did together, we were on Venice Boulevard and we're trying to get the Love Line. Right. We were like, where are we?
Halloween. On Halloween for Dr. Drew. And I actually put him in my book because I had worked with one of his people, Jeff Conaway. I mean, after Jeff died, I had worked with him because his sister came to be Michelle. And Jeff had been with Dr. Drew for a long time and had drug addiction and passed away. And Jeff came to me the night before you and I were going to be on his show and said, please thank Dr. Drew for helping me. And I mean, it was remember? And I said to you, should I tell him that message? And you said, oh, make sure you tell him that. And he was just so moved. I remember that. He cried. Yeah. Yeah.
It changed him.
It changed him.
One more thing about the book. I want to talk about your mom. So your mom was working with you and she passed really the beginning of the book, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Half it was done or?
She passed before I could get, I was taking care of her for so many years. I couldn't get to finish the book. I just couldn't because I was very devoted to my mother. I mean, extremely devoted. I would have done anything to her and I would do anything to keep her alive now if I could. But I mean, responsibility. So I unfortunately couldn't start writing the book, and then after she passed, I had a lot of mixed feelings because when a loved one passes, I was angry. I was really was pissed off. And it was not easy because my mother was also not in her right frame of mind when she was passing. And so all of it was tough. So I can relate to all kinds of things on all levels of this.
And the book, I want to say, it glitters. Even the cover just glitters. And your mother kind of wrote it from the other side point of view as well.
There you go. It does glitter.
There we go. There it is. It glitters. It is.
Thank you. Oh, my mom helped. She would come to you. In fact, when my mother passed, it was 11:30 at night. You were on an airplane.
Airplane from New York to LA, yeah.
And you called me and said, your mother passed. I said, she did. Like 5 minutes. And then you said to me, she said, I tell her I'm not dead because my mother had feared.
Why are you crying? I'm not dead. She kept on saying.
I'm not dead.
Lou,
God bless her. She was amazing.
Kelly, what do you help people get out of your incredible book?
Oh, thank you, James. I hope that they can relate to the stories from their own life stories. I want them to understand that never give up. Keep learning. Set boundaries for people.
Boundaries
are going to be so important. I want people to know that the other side exists. I want people to never let anything hold them back. And I don't care what kind of situation you're in. Figure out how to get out of it. If it's a bad situation, figure it out. If you take the time, and things sometimes take time, things do change in life. And I can tell you that there were times where I didn't know if I was going to make it in many of these events, but I did. I just kept going, moving forward. And that's what I want everybody to do and relate to the stories, especially people that are having a spiritual awakening, because this is about my spiritual awakening.
A lot of people will be able to relate. A lot of people are going to be able
Oh,
to relate to this book. So we're honored that you've touched millions of lives, Kellee, and really sharing your story, because it will help so many people, and they're not going to feel alone. They're not going to feel abnormal. They're going to feel, oh, this is me too. I can relate to this.
well, and that was the whole thing, James. I want people to relate to that, and I tell it in a way that some people have said that it sounds like I'm having a private dialogue with them or a personal dialogue with them, and I think that's a wonderful. I love that. I really appreciate that, everybody.
Sitting right here speaking, you can hear your voice for sure.
Yeah. So, and James, I want to thank you. You really not just encouraged me, you did everything you could to help move this on and move this forward. And I really feel like we had a baby here together. It was a lot of responsibility, but you really, gosh, James, you were the best. And I can't thank you enough.
It's an important book. It's a real important book that gets out there, so people should read. So R&R, responsibility and resilience.
And resilience, everybody.
And Kellee, is you're having this Thursday, Ask Me Anything?
I'll be on my show this Thursday, Ask Me Anything, and then and I'll be back with you again next week. And I'm going to be speaking. I have some speaking engagement on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd with Jen Weigel. I'm going to be at All Souls Weekend. And you have what, Mediumship 2 coming up?
Mediumship 2 is coming up soon. Yeah, but next week you launch that Mediumship 2.
Which week. Anybody, if you're thinking about taking Mediumship 2, James is the teacher. Please, I can tell you from personal experience, take it.
Yes, it's a good one. Thank you. Love you, Connie. Thank you.
I love you. Thank you so much, James.
Discovering the Unseen World. Order it now.
Oh, we have one more surprise to say. I got one more surprise. Can I tell them about our friend?
Yes.
Okay, I can. Okay. It was just announced that, or it's not been announced yet, but it will be, that Greg Braden, who was on our show last week, is going to feature my book which is so great, to his followers for his October book. So it will come out October 1st on Greg Braden's a newsletter that goes out.
That's great.
Yay!
Good one. It'll change the world.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kellee. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Everybody.
Thanks, Ryan.